Yes, and good evening.
Good evening.
As required by Iowa law, we are holding a public hearing in advance of the board's consideration of the 2025-26 school year calendar. And so tonight I'm just going to share with you a few of the highlights on that in advance of the board's consideration at the next meeting. As a reminder, the Iowa school calendar requirements call for the school district, or every school, to begin the school year no earlier than August 23rd. As I've noticed, their proposed legislation, and something we might discuss later in the meeting, it could provide more flexibility. The school year must include at least 1,080 hours of instruction, or roughly 180 school days. We go by hours here in the Council Bluffs Schools. And then new fairly recently was the addition of allowing it to 5 remote learning days. And guess what? We're having one tomorrow. So before we get into the specifics of the calendar proposal, I want to share with you that we took some time to survey our staff as well as our parents related to their preferences on a couple of options. And then we also utilized the superintendent's roundtable for discussion and also to seek other feedback from staff on proposals. So we feel like it's a really good group effort to come up with the calendar proposals for you. In the survey of staff and parents, the option that we're presenting to you today was favored by 61.7% of employees and 61.1% of parents. So it wasn't a 51-49, it was quite conclusive. Another 3.9 of staff and 4.7 of parents said they really had no preference. So we felt comfortable presenting this to you for consideration. And you each have a copy of this at your table. But it is, the highlights include beginning August 25th this school year. Unfortunately, the 23rd is a weekend, and I don't think anybody'd go for that. So the 25th is the first date with the current law that we could start the 25th. It does include the traditional 2-week winter break, which our families have indicated and our staff that they really enjoy. It does have a few breaks here, like long weekends in the springtime, and just a very short spring break this year. That is the option that was favored in order for us to have a 3-day weekend in March to break up that semester time right around conferences. And this does allow us to get out to end the school year, I should say, on May 22nd, which is just before the Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day weekend is a little early this year. So not only could we not start till the 25th, but May 22nd is getting us to that point where we're dismissing before the weekend, which is a preference by our families. So that is a total of 1,082 hours at 0.25, which is only 2.25 hours above our requirement. So we're not leaving ourselves much wiggle room for no school days. So we will just maybe potentially a 2-hour late start would be about all we could handle in this proposed calendar. So with that, our next steps are requesting your approval at the next meeting, communication and distribution of the calendar to our families and staff, and then our HR team will develop the employee calendars to coincide with this calendar. With that, Dr. Morello, I would entertain any questions.
The proposed legislation coming up that may bring the calendar year forward in August, would we come back to reevaluate?
We would.
Okay.
And I think, Mr. Tripp, that in our push out of communication, we've informed the staff of that. There were 4 legislative bills that were introduced, but only one has come out of committee. And it really is the one that doesn't mention the state fair. It just mentions not before this time and not before this. So we start and end. It kind of gives you some guidance, but it doesn't mention the state fair, which has kind of gotten a little bit of traction. It always feels like there is some traction, but I'm not sure we'll get it across the finish line.
Anything else for Mrs. Strauss?
I'm just glad that we had that survey and can do something that parents and staff are wanting, so.
Thank you, Ms. Ostrowski. I'll take a moment for public participation regarding our public hearing. Any member of the public here tonight who wishes to come up and speak? Seeing as there is none, our public hearing is closed. I now call to order the workshop meeting for the Council of Community Schools. Mrs. Ostrowski, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Kozire.
Present.
Mrs. Greiner.
Present.
Ms. Hardeman.
Here.
Ms. Myers.
Present.
Mr. Peters.
Here.
Mr. Tripp.
Here.
And Dr. Ozello online. Okay.
Thank you. If you all would rise and join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I move to approve our agenda as presented.
Thank you.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any discussion regarding the agenda? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Agenda is approved. Next up, we have approval of our minutes. Work session and regular business meeting of January 28th of '25. Is there a motion?
I move that the minutes from the work session and regular business meetings of January 28th, 2025 be approved as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion regarding those minutes? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Next up, we have our public participation. It's an opportunity for members of the public to address the board regarding any agenda item or any other matters of concern. I do not have any notices. Any members of the public want to address the board tonight? Seeing as there is none, we will move on. Superintendent's report. Dr. Murillo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Matthews to the podium. Dr. Matthews this evening is presenting on our winter 2024-25 NWEA MAP results. Certainly excited for Dr. Matthews to share some of our celebrations, and also as the work continues, we know we're not at the finish line yet, but we definitely are seeing good progress. So Dr. Matthews, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo, and good evening.
Good evening.
It is my pleasure to share the results of our winter MAP assessment administration with you all this evening. As a reminder, I would like to start with just a little overview about the assessment. It is administered 3 times per year in the areas of math, reading, and science in grades kindergarten through 11th. In science is actually only 5th through 11th right now. It does provide a roadmap for teachers and administrators. It gives us immediate feedback on student growth and individual performance, and we can also run reports not only at that individual student level, but at the class level, the school level, a grade level, district level, to really give us additional insights to make instructional decisions. We really appreciate also that it not only measures performance of students, but growth of students to see that the needle is moving for each of our students. So those are just some of those key points about the assessment. This work aligns directly with District Strategic Goal 1, which is to improve academic achievement, and we have 3 different metrics for this goal centered around that performance and growth data. So the first target there is related to the percentage of students who are scoring in those top 3 bands on the MAP assessment. There are 5 bands overall, and our goal is to have 65% of our students scoring in those top 3 bands by the end of this school year, and then to increase that to 70% by the end of next school year. We also look at the percentage of students who are meeting those individual growth targets. each time students take the MAP assessment, NWEA actually calculates a target growth goal for that student based on their current level of performance and comparing them to other students in their grade level in that content area at that level. They predict that 50% will make that growth target because it's normed and averaged, so 50% will and 50% won't because they're comparing the students against other students in that group. Our goal is to have a stretch of 60% of students meeting that growth target from fall to spring. We do like to see where we're at from fall to winter, though. And then finally, because we believe every student can learn, we set a goal of 100% of students demonstrating some growth as measured by MAP in all 3 content areas. So with that, I will give you a little bit of an overview of where we are in all of those goals before we look at each content area more specifically. So again, that first metric on students performing in those top 3 bands, the goal is 65%. In math, we are at 60.23%. In reading, we are at 58.49%. And in science, we are at 62.45%. I'm very pleased to tell you that those are all increases from where we were in the fall. For the percentage of students achieving their growth targets, again, we have that stretch goal of 60%. In math, we have currently exceeded that goal. We are at 61.85%. In reading and science, we are very close there, just over 51% in each of those areas. So again, above that norm, what we can expect, not quite to that stretch goal yet. And then finally, in demonstrating any growth, that goal is 100%. We have 79, just over 79% in math, 54% in reading, and 51.55% in science. I did want to point out that growth targets and any growth for science are identical. These, again, are those students who are only tested in grades 5-11. And if you recall from previous years, the older students have the higher RIT scores and the smaller margin for RIT growth. So students who made any growth in science also met their growth goals from fall to winter. So just an interesting anomaly there. So digging in a little bit further, we will start with the area of mathematics. Very pleased to show that we had a 4.93% increase from fall to winter, where we began at 55.3%. Looking at that over time, from when we very first began administering the MAP assessment in the spring of 2018, you can see that trajectory. You might recall this fall as well as last fall, we saw those decreases. You can see those drops there. That is when NWEA configured some new algorithms, and we saw those consistent decreases in the fall. But you can see both years we really rebounded with our winter achievement there. Looking at the math performance by grade level, beginning with kindergarten through 11th grade and then the district average at the end, you can see the percentage of students scoring in those top 3 bands by each grade. The highest performing grades continue to be kindergarten and first, and more than half the grades and the district average are surpassing that 60% of students in the top 3 bands. We have 4 grade levels that are at or above our end of year goal of 65%. Those first 3 grades there, kindergarten through 2nd, and then very impressed to see 9th grade standing out for our secondary at that end of year goal. That teal line is showing the same students who took the assessment in the fall, where they were performing then, over that purple bar to show where they are performing now in the winter. So you can see the growth by each cohort there. Nearly 5% increase as a district overall is what you can see at the very end here. Double-digit increases in kindergarten, 2nd, and 3rd grades. And we had increases in all but 3 grade levels, with the most noticeable drop in 10th grade. When we switch gears and look at our data related to that growth target, as a reminder, I just put that teal line in there to show that 50% that NWEA says you can expect, and then the yellow line there is showing our stretch goal of 60%. Really some exciting data here. We see that at elementary, we have every single grade level above that 60% stretch goal, that end of year target for students meeting that growth goal. All but 3 grade levels in our district as a whole exceeded that national average of 50% of students meeting the growth targets as well. Finally, we have 4 grade levels that exceeded 70% and others are approaching that. Last year, we had one grade level at this time at that 70%. So we're continuing to move the needle in the right direction there. When we look at the students who make any growth, you'll notice right away that higher percentage at elementary. I just discussed that with you a little bit because of those RIT scores. That margin is a little bit more difficult to sustain for those higher grade levels when their RIT scores get higher. I will show you how this compared. I apologize. So just again, that consistency of more students making any growth at those lower grade levels where they're at lower RITs and have more growth to make. When we look at student groups, these are the student groups performing at those top 3 levels again, starting with our all students. Right away, you will notice the next 2 student groups, those who are receiving ELL and IEP services, have our greatest variance in achievement. Then we have our racial and ethnic groups after that, Asian, Black, Hispanic, Native American, multiracial, and white. And then finally, our students who are in the lower socioeconomic status. So just to give you an idea of how students are performing in individual student groups, this is something that each school really looks at and drills down into to make sure that they're meeting the needs of each group of students. What's really exciting here is when you look at those same student groups and you look at the percentage of students meeting those growth targets by student group, that is much more consistent. There's much less variance in that data. So we are continuing to meet the needs of students where they're at, even if they're not at that level of achievement, they are making those great growth gains. So very pleased to see that. Next, we'll take a look at our reading data. Again, we had a nice increase here of almost 2.5% from when we started in the fall. As a reminder, we are in our second year of elementary curriculum implementation. We updated our resource last year, and I think you'll see in the data that our elementary teachers are feeling more comfortable and confident with the resource as well as the professional learning that they're receiving to go with that. Again, looking at this data over time, beginning with the spring of 2018 and up to our current data point, you can see we had a nice increase there, and we are actually higher at this point than any time that we were last school year. So we really plan to see that trajectory continue upward and finish with a nice high in the spring. Again, looking at the reading proficiency at each grade level and then the district average, you can see here all but one grade level is at or above 50%. We have 5 grade levels over 60%, and 1 grade level is exceeding the end of year goal of 65%. 9th grade is our highest performing secondary grade for the 3rd consecutive year. So really pleased with the positive transition they're making that supports Goal 3 as well. We are still seeing lower scores at 6th grade, and we know that that's when students do transition to the 6+ assessment rather than the 2-5, and they are renormed at that point. So this has been and will continue to be an area of focus. Again, comparing this cohort data to where they were in the fall with that teal line, you might recall each year that 2nd grade number goes down. They're taking the assessment independently for the first time, but we are seeing that nice increase there. We had increases in all but 3 grades, and we are continuing to support schools with their MTSS process to drill down on this data, respond to student needs, and to triangulate this data with other assessments to really determine their areas of focus. Again, looking at the growth targets, we have 60% meeting or exceeding our end of year goal in 3 grade levels in kindergarten through 2nd grade. Again, there you can see above that 60% line. And we now have 8 grade levels meeting or exceeding that 50% national average in the area of reading. This very closely mirrors the any growth map that you saw for math, where again, those younger students, a higher percentage of them are making any growth with those lower RITs. Really want to highlight 8th grade as a secondary standout for being above that 60%. That's really difficult with those higher RIT scores, and so that was a standout celebration for our secondary schools for any growth. For our student group data, this is also similar to what we saw in math, where we see more variance in our EL and IEP student groups when looking at the overall performance of these students in the top 3 bands. But again, similar to math, we have less variance when we look at the student groups and the amount of growth, or the percentage of students who met their growth targets in the area of reading. We know that we still need to work to accelerate that learning to close those achievement gaps, so that continues to be a focus for us as well. Switching now to our last content area, we will take a look at science. And we saw an increase. It was a slight increase of 0.34%, but an increase nonetheless. And as I said earlier, the first time since I've reported that we've had fall to winter increases in all 3 content areas. You may recall some changes to our middle school schedules last year and some concern around that. So I'm very excited to show you the grade level data that we have that shows the teachers are really embracing those changes and making sure that students are learning at high levels. Again, looking at this data over time, now for science at each testing window, this doesn't have as many data points. We did not begin administering science math assessments until winter of 2021, but going through our current winter 2025, you can see this is pretty steady, not as much variance up and down throughout those testing windows. When we look at the reading proficiency at each grade level, 5th grade through 11th grade, and then the district average, again, a lot less variance in the data in our science area. Students are performing at a pretty similar rate, and it's nice to see that they're continuing to grow on the content knowledge that they've learned before. We're really emphasizing that just because they don't assess until 5th grade, all of the learning they do in K through 4 is very important as well. The next one shows then that cohort data, so where they were in the fall. You might remember this is the first time we administered the fall assessment in science, so for 5th grade. And so we do have that growth percent of proficiency from 5th grade for the first time here too. Very steady fall to winter in the area of science. When we look at the growth targets for science, again, I dropped those lines there. The first thing I want to point out to you is that there is not a graph for 11th grade. And that is because NWEA is not able to set a growth target for 11th grade students because they do not administer enough assessments at that grade level to set that growth target goal for us. So I just wanted to note that there. But when we do look at this, what you can see is we have half of our grades that are at or above that national average. 5th grade is really close. They're approaching that 60% goal. And this is an area where we are able to really drill down into a quadrant report in MAP to see who is getting that performance but not making the level of growth that we would expect, and make adjustments there to make sure we're really accelerating the learning of all students. Again, we look at the percentage of students making any growth in science. Similar, 5th and 6th grade are a little bit higher, our younger grade levels with the lower RITs, but less variance here because we aren't seeing that full K through 11 picture. And what was really compelling to me was looking at this compared to last year, because we didn't have our science growth in our metrics last year. This year we do. And when you look at the percentage of students who made any growth this year compared to last year at the same time, it is really outstanding. And I especially want to highlight those middle school grade levels, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I know a lot of intentional work and focus went into prioritizing the standards and the content that needs to be taught and really maximizing that instructional time they have with those changes. So kudos to the team of teachers that are implementing the hard work and making sure our students are still learning. For our student groups, again, we can see that EL and IEP student groups have the greatest amount of variance in their achievement. EL even more so in the area of science, which is not that surprising with the really heavy domain-specific content vocabulary while you're already trying to acquire a new language. So definitely something we're keeping our eye on, but we know that that is a little bit to be expected with the language acquisition process. I also want to remind you, with only the 5th through 11th grade students counted in this data set, some of these student groups are very small, like less than 20 students. So a few students can really sway your data one way or the other, and we keep that in mind as we analyze each student group as well. And then finally, the percentage of students who are meeting their growth targets by student group. We do see a little bit more variance in this area in science than we did in math and reading. This being the first year that we really dug into this as a metric for our district strategic goal 1, this is definitely an area of focus for our science department. So that concludes the summary of our science data as it relates to strategic goal 1. Now I would like to talk to you about next steps to continue the progress toward our goals. The first is right now we are in the process of engaging in data consults with school leaders to review progress of their school improvement plans and to really determine additional supports that are needed. So Dr. Murillo, along with our chiefs of schools, our chief of student and family services, and myself, are hearing through the lens of the principal where they are, what their action steps are, and what they might need to continue to move forward. We are also continuing to collaboratively plan and facilitate administrator professional learning around best practices in teaching and learning. So again, the teaching and learning department and school leadership are really partnering on this because we know we have a different lens sometimes, but we all need to come around together to support principals and supporting teachers and supporting students because that's what counts. You heard me mention a couple of times drilling down. We're really leveraging our MTSS process, that multi-tiered systems of support, using the data available to us through MAP, and then also through formative assessments through our collaborative teams to identify and respond when students need additional support or enrichment to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all learners. And then we are completing our second round of academic learning walks right now. You might recall some previous presentations about those, but we're really able to go into the schools, celebrate those successes, and then identify some trends and action steps to, again, further support schools through those learning walks and trends. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Not as much a question, more just a comment. It's exciting to see what you mentioned that we had positive growth, in all three sectors. I think every time we present on math, I still love seeing, the historical trend, see that 10% growth from 2018 to now. Like that's huge. That's amazing to see. And I'm really glad that you pointed out the grade difference between first and second grade. That's my question every time we do math. And so it was really great for with reading to see that in second grade there wasn't nearly as much of a dip as we've seen in the past. So exciting.
Thank you.
With that, did you say that there was also a change between 5th and 6th, how the test is?
Yes, so there are 3 different versions of the MAP assessment. So there's the K3, or K2, I'm sorry, and 2-5. So that second grade overlaps, and we choose to administer the 2-5. And then when they hit 6th grade, it's called the 6+. And so they switch that assessment, and it renorms them.
Gotcha. So historically, we see that dip at 2nd and at 6th partially because of the way the test is. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I did like to see the growth in science for the middle school with the new scheduling. Did we see anything comparable in like reading and math for growth?
In pockets, I would say. So that is definitely what we're still working on with each school.
Okay.
Yes, I would say there are definitely successes there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Matthews.
And at this time, I'm going to invite Ms. Ostrowski to the podium. She's going to do a brief update for the legislative session. I know that we're just getting started, so we don't have a lot of answers, but we felt like it'd be great for our community and the board just to kind of get a high-level overview of where we are, knowing that we haven't even got to the first funnel yet. So, Ms. Ostrowski, the floor is yours.
You bet, and thank you so much. And I agree, brief is fine, but it is great to have these conversations in public. Each Friday, we do provide you with an update from our advocacy partners, so we can kind of keep track of the bills and their progression. But tonight, I'm going to just give a few highlights. As a reminder, there are 4 legislative priorities that were set by this board. And we will just give you a little taste of what's happening in each of those here tonight. For full-day preschool funding, there are a couple of bills, one in the Senate and one in the House, that increased to the full funding, the 1.0 funding. Those are both in committee. There has not been much action at this point. As you know, the governor did mention preschool in her her condition of the state proposal, and early childhood continuum of care programs was what she focused on. And that really is to connect preschool opportunities and childcare entities so that partnerships could be formed and that potentially there could be some wraparound services available, especially for families who may not be able to take advantage of preschool because of no after and before care for the working family. But we are watching all of these carefully and will continue to advocate for full funding, which has been this board's priority for many, many years. Regarding the school funding, which is another priority, I think there was hot off the press today some news that the Senate passed out of and moved to the House a bill that included this 2% increase in the state supplementary assistance, okay? And then, so the House will see that. The House is also considering the approval of, through its committee, did approve a study bill that has the 2.25% increase, which is, getting closer, but still not really adequate, as we all know, okay? It does some other things. So we'll continue to follow this. And just as a note, the per pupil funding amount would increase at 2% from the current $78.26 to a little over $8,000 per student. That's a $191 increase. And as you can see, for 2.25, if that were to come to fruition, would be an additional 210 over this year's per student revenue.
But that's for those school districts that are growing.
Right, right.
So we'll see roughly $95 a student since we have just the 1% guarantee.
Thank you.
Dave, Mr. Gozar, that is so critical for our legislators to soon look at the declining
Yeah.
birth rates in the state of Iowa, and that of the 327 districts, 159, their enrollment decreased. So there has to be a pivot in their thinking around how do we fund schools, and it can't just be straight off of school districts that are increasing enrollment, and those that are not, even landlocked as we are, with no additional homes being built. How do we continue to support them at the rate that they should be supported?
Too, and they're not really addressing the issue that some school districts have a lot higher percentage of their students with IEPs, with individual education plans. If we take a look at our student population, roughly 19% of our students have individual education plans, which are much more resource heavy, requiring more services, and yet we still don't receive adequate funding, and we yearly have a deficit funding, a deficit spending for those students with IEPs, and I wish they would understand that when they start taking students away from our district, that just puts a greater burden on those districts that have students with high needs, student populations with that are English learners. We're roughly 15% of our student population is English learners. So we have a lot of challenges that they don't really take into consideration when they're developing their funding formula for the districts throughout the state. So it's really hard for us. Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, we will, one of the other priorities is related to mental health services for students, and there's not really anything moving very fast regard. There's a couple that require districts to publish resources from an organization called Your Life Iowa. Margaret Buckton indicated there are some that are talking about providing some additional therapeutic classroom resources, as well as this Senate File 102 that requires districts to implement some training. So she indicated that a lot of the funding that we're looking for to support our efforts will come forward in more of the appropriations bills. Okay, so we'll keep an eye out for those as well. The last priority area we really already touched base on, and that's regarding the school start date. The one that Dr. Murillo pointed out is the one that Senate File 205 that allows schools to start the Monday prior to, let me say that right. The Monday preceding the last Monday in August. So for this coming year, that would mean we could start on August 18th. So that could affect the ability to then propose a new calendar to the board, okay? The following year, it wouldn't be till the 24th. So every calendar year is a little bit different. So we'll monitor those, right? All right, just a few others. The governor's cell phone bill, I think we all heard her visit about that in her condition of the state. This would require the DE to provide model policies and local school boards to adopt them. On chronic absenteeism, there is a study bill that would provide some flexibility, which is good, that would not require us to send certified mail to families at a certain threshold of absenteeism. And of course, that'd be a cost-saving measure. There's a bill that allows teacher recruitment and retention expenses to come from the management fund, which I think we support. And then finally, there is, and I think we've seen this several years now, proposals to have a citizenship test requirement for all graduating seniors. The first funnel is March 3rd, so we're still a little bit away from that, but we're continuing to take a look and see if there are advocacy opportunities. One of them is attending the local chambers coffees that are held at Wilson Middle School. We're glad to have the great space for them. The first one was this last weekend, and you can see the dates up here of the upcoming events from 9 to 10:30 on those Saturday mornings. So with that, Dr. Murillo, that concludes my presentation, if there is any discussion.
I do want to point out that inflation in Iowa was at about 2.9%. So the increase in SSA, again, does not match inflation. So they did briefly talk about that at the legislators' coffee on Saturday. So Mr. Segrist is aware that our schools are being underfunded, so.
A part of me is wondering, like, when we talked back to the conversation of the 1% guarantee, that maybe when we put together our priorities for next year, that we put more emphasis on that. It seems like every year there's always a squabble of the percentage of, is it going to be 2, is it going to be 2.5, is it going to be, 3, when really, I mean, as you said, half of our school districts aren't going to see that because they had a decrease. Maybe instead our push should be, hey, this 1% guarantee should really, when we're having other actions like, ESAs and things that in the most gracious light are, giving other students the opportunity, for private schools. I mean, you would see a decrease then in public schools. And I think that now we're not really accounting for that. And I just, maybe that should be our focus in our
I
next
agree,
year.
Mr. Peters. I think that sometimes there's an aha that hits you, like the year 2. And that's the one thing that we began to talk about is the superintendent from Iowa City, Matt, was really about, we need to get the UENs to do a study on the birth rate. But I also think in that study becomes how many students are going and using the ESAs, and how many are going into homeschool, and how many are going online learning, and how many are moving into charters. And then how do they appropriate the dollars correctly so that all public schools and private schools are funded correctly. Instead of saying, well, your enrollment decreased, so you get a 1%. Well, 1% is like 600,000 for us. I mean, I don't, that hardly will cover our increase for busing, right? So you understand that, and I think they see how much money is in the large pot that's allocated for schools. We're going to move all of these millions of dollars for schools, but knowing that, and hopefully soon understanding that a school district may lose 100 students, but those 100 students are not in third grade. So I can't just cut 3 teachers in third grade. There's going to be 5 over here in kindergarten, there's going to be 10 in first, there's going to be 20 in second. And so because they're so sporadic, there's never that opportunity unless we decide our class sizes become 40. Because there's not an opportunity for me just to cut 4 teachers because I lost 100 kids, which would be 25, 25, 25, because they're not all in the same place. They're throughout kindergarten through 12th grade. And so them trying to maybe problem solve with us is kind of like with the absenteeism and the chronic. They heard us. They're working with us. They're revising that bill. They've got to hear us around funding. I don't want to have dollars that I just waste. I want to have enough dollars so that I can provide a high-quality education for every student in our state and in Council Bluffs. So it's worth a conversation for them to understand the why it's important to us that we look at declining enrollment, declining birth rates, and how we adjust what we've done for the last 25 years in funding schools is no longer going to work. And that's where we've got to take it to them. So you're right on, that's my goal.
Other commentary from the board?
Related to the cell phone policy, I was glad to see that the Department of Education is coming out with guidelines. I think when it was in its early states, it was more just requiring districts to adopt some policy with no guidelines, and that was kind of scary to see. So that is one positive, is I'm glad that they came out with guidelines.
I do have a question. SSB 1077, I hadn't followed that. The state does require us to send a certified letter. How much do we spend on certified letters?
Mr. Hamilton, do you have a rough estimate?
Yeah, rough.
I can tell you some districts are reporting, like when I was on the Iowa Public Radio show, Dr. Roberts, who's the superintendent of Des Moines, he was saying he was already had spent over $80,000. We have not spent that type, but that amount, but I think it's a credit to, we communicate every month, whether they have good attendance or poor attendance, with our families. And Tim developed that system with his staff, Mr. Hamilton did, to notify our parents and keep them in the loop, which has probably decreased the number of certified letters we have to send.
Yeah, we are sending them out each quarter, so we haven't sent them out yet for quarter 2, just because we finished that process a week or so ago, but it's about the $4 certified letter, so it's rather expensive.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else regarding our legislative update?
I did appreciate the legislative session timetable that was posted too, so, for the public.
And Mr. Tripp, for our last presentation, I'm super excited for this presentation, and I'm very thankful for the guests that we have here with us tonight to speak to the board and our community that's watching about our new Innovation and Sports Center. So, Mr. Hamilton, the floor is yours.
Yeah, you may remember, thank you, Dr. Murillo and board, I am truly excited to talk about this too. You may remember a few months ago, maybe almost a year ago, Mr. Stile and I came to a board session and told you about this vision and this idea that we had on how we could use the former Crescent Elementary School. So I'm going to present some information about that tonight, knowing that there's still some next steps, and I'll go over that with you. So you all voted to change the name to the Innovation and Sports Center, formerly Crescent Elementary. This goes very hand in hand with Goal 4, which is to ensure each student is supported and connected. We've gone over this many times, but we know if we can connect kids to something outside their normal school day, they're going to have higher academic achievement, and research shows this, higher attendance rates, and really a higher sense of engagement. So you will see here the Innovation and Sports Center, the Branding is up on there on both the building and the sign. Mr. Stile wanted to be here tonight, and it really has been a co-effort between himself and myself to get this done, but really the people in this picture are facilities and maintenance staff. They have taken to this and really done a tremendous job. We've had the opportunity to show it off to our cabinet members. We had the current and former mayor of Crescent come in. We've had some youth groups come in, and so far everybody is saying nothing but really positive things about the use of the space. That being said, let's talk about that a little bit. So we have the baseball, softball, pitching, hitting, and training center. This center is in the former gym space. We have an indoor turf that's 34 by 65 feet, totally enclosed with nets. The net then can break down into 3 pitching lanes or hitting lanes. That's 6 batting areas, because when they bat, they hit opposite from the center. Does that make sense? And then we also have separate storage. So this facility is a district facility. So the baseball coaches and softball coaches all came up to the facility. We had a chance to say the materials, the bases, everything that's used there is going to be used by both AL and TJ staff, and they're great at sharing, and we're building up the stuff that we have there. With that, I want to show you some pictures of what it looks like. We were actually up there one day when TJ Baseball was up using the facility. So the top left corner, you can see that's looking out from one corner, and you can see the enclosures with some pitching nets and stuff in there. The center picture, what's cool about it is it can open up completely. So not just for pitching and hitting, but you can do some agility work, and you can see on the bottom left, the agility work, and the top right, agility work. It's a big enough space that after we all saw it, we realized, like, hey, we might be able to get some kind of soccer in here and some of these football things in there as well, because it's a nice turf. Turned out even better than we were expecting it to turn out. And then here's a long picture from the 3 separate zones in the gym there. I'd like to invite Tyler Britsky, who is our head AL baseball coach, to come up and talk about how he's using the facility and how he's going to use it in the future.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me, and a huge thank you to the board and every other hand that kind of went into making this a reality. Dr. Murillo, thank you so much. I mean, really, when we talk about 4A facilities, this is what we're talking about. And so it feels really, really nice to have a home. When we're at the schools, we have great facilities, but it's multi-purpose facilities. And so to be able to walk into a space like this and see the 3 lanes and an opportunity to accomplish whatever we need to accomplish to get our athletes better is really, really outstanding. So we're really looking forward to a couple things. We have a youth hitting camp coming up. So that whole part of developing youth programs, giving them a space that they can use for free, giving us instruction, giving us a chance to instruct those kids and us a chance to work with youth coaches is just huge. And it's a different opportunity than maybe some of the other facilities around town or even in Omaha. So this is a really, really positive step forward, and we could not be more thrilled to have it. So,
How do you see this impacting our students and their ability to improve their skills?
for sure. So kind of back to what I kind of just said a little bit ago, like we're really looking at developing youth programs. We have a lot of select things that kind of go on in our city, but we don't quite have that. We don't have the, I guess, non-select option for these coaches to come in and get some work done. And so providing them a space with sort of structure that the high school coaches, Shay and I, provide for them, I think is really, really huge. So we're going to see, I think, more participation in baseball and softball numbers at an earlier age because of this particular space.
Good,
Yeah.
good,
It'll save families a lot of money, really, truly.
good.
It's kind of like the discussion I had about having feeders. How do we feed our middle school?
Yeah.
How do we feed our high school with kids playing? And
Yeah, it's easy, right? I mean, with basketball and other sports, you have a gym, you have hoops that can go up and down, you have a ton of space. Hitting baseballs in a gym is not always ideal. I think a lot of basketball coaches would frown upon that. And some other things. I mean, baseball's tough and softball's tough. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of equipment. And to be able to not have to move that stuff all over the place and have a safe space for our guys to operate and our girls to operate is really, really awesome. Yeah.
It's well organized, the closets. I mean, I was in there messing with the TJ boys, getting some balls and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all just lined up there for the kids. The kids have to feel really valued and that we care about the sport, because they just, I mean, you guys came in and gave us feedback. And then we're able, they don't have to carry this equipment. We're gonna put it there for them to walk in and find, well, the boys still wear their bags and stuff with their bags and stuff, but it's just fabulous to see that we can provide the support to our softball and our baseball teams.
Right, cuts down a lot of time too, beginning with practice. You don't have to pull out all of this stuff. It's there, it's ready, and, you guys can get right to practice instead of spending the first 10, 15 minutes pulling out equipment.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Coach Britsky mentioned something, and it's important to know. We have sign-ups, so we create a sign-up that all of our athletic teams get a chance to be able to sign up to use this. Also, it's available for our feeder programs. I had a couple coaches that were doing robotic stuff come up to me and when they were looking at the gym, and they said, how do we sign up? So we sign up just like we do any other space. And like Coach Britsky said, our goal, if they're a feeder program of ours and our high school teams aren't using it, we're going to let them use it for free because it's building, again, our own kids to be better athletes. So, moving on to the robotics program, we're currently using 3 of the classrooms and the hallway when it comes to robotics, and I'm going to show you a few pictures here. And if you've been around robotics, they spread out and need space. What's really cool about the space up there is there's 3 fields that are down and ready, just like Coach Britsky talked about baseball and having it ready to go. You don't have to drop a net. You don't have to do all those things. So we have 3 fields that are tournament ready. Flexible workspaces. They were creative using some of the desks and things we had there and tables we had. So they're able to move stuff around, lay stuff out. Kids can spread out when they're doing robotics, which if you've been to a robotics competition, you know it's really important to just have some space to sometimes crawl on the floor or do lots of other things. And the space is really large enough for competitions. So you can see just a few pictures here. That's our kids. They've already been up there doing leagues, and Christy Arthur's going to come up and talk about that. Christy is really, when it talks about robotics in Council Bluffs, she's really been a leader for us. She does it through 21st Century and through Vex Robotics. So I'm going to invite Christy to come up and talk about her experiences there.
You know, very much, I just want to thank you all for these opportunities that these kids have. I mean, 10 years ago when we started talking about robotics, it was like, oh, it's scary, we can't do it. And our district has really, truly embraced it. And we're one of the few in Iowa that every school has this opportunity in. And that's something that you guys provided to them. We got a little stuck with the after-school programs because it's not feasible to go to multiple tournaments a year, right? It's really, really kind of hard to navigate all that, get all the families there, make it all happen. So the kids weren't really getting their opportunities. And when they brought this opportunity and said, hey, there's this space, you want a room? Yes. What are you going to do with it? I don't know. So this is what we did with it. We were able to host a league, which gave the students 4 opportunities to come down, and we had a snow day, so it ended up being 3, but it worked out just fine. But they would have 4 opportunities to get their go through inspections, do all the different things that they would do at a large tournament, right? And they would have their own little private spaces. And he's right, they crawl on the floor and they build things and they change everything. And then the next time they go back to their clubs, they can make changes and they can come back. What I saw was a quadruple in their skill score and their driving and their understanding what the game is. And the piece that just is so hard to explain to anybody is the notebooking, the decision-making process that they go through. Think, do, test, and then what their matrix were and all that. They document all of this. And so we were able to see those changes over the next 4 or 3 weeks in this case for us. So we hosted over 100 kids. We did use 3 classrooms. The materials were there. They just said, hey, use the tables you want, use the chairs you want. The custodians came down and helped me with a couple things. They were amazing. I mean, they were just phenomenal the whole time. The space made this opportunity happen. We learned a lot. We know next year we can do things a little bit different, make it a little easier on everybody. But when I look at their faces and I look at what they've been able to accomplish, having a space that they know, you know what? Maybe I don't have a field at my school because there's not classroom space, but I bet my coach could take me to this space, and it gives them a home. It gives them an ability to work on a robot and then leave it, and then come back to it just as it is, as opposed to it being stuck in a box where you don't remember what you were working on the time before. So this is going to open up a lot of different opportunities. It's also, I think, really good for our district because US Open's going to come. There's these different groups that come in from out of town, and they always say, well, where can we practice? Where can we test our robot that flew on an airplane that maybe got yeeted and maybe it works and maybe it doesn't? And so these are going to be nice, clean, available, lit, with lots of different resources in it already set up. So thank you guys, really from the bottom of my heart, and for all the kids. I mean, if you could have seen their faces and heard their explanation of just everything that they learned, it was really terrific. So thank you for making it possible for them.
I had a question, with the league, so that we're just at grade level, or are they competing up a grade then, so that they could learn from the students that have been in the program longer? How are they interacting, and what kind of mentorships are we fostering? Because everybody's in the same building now, and they can help each other through that process of building creating a better notebook, and because that was the biggest challenge I noticed, is that their notebooks weren't necessarily a working document. They did it once and they just kind of set it by the side. And I see, if you're talking about the league, that I envision, well, they're going through that decision-making process, they're making those changes, they're updating their notebook on a daily and weekly basis. So I'm looking at how is that helping our students grow and building those relationships with older students?
So that's going to be a three-part answer for you.
I gave you like 5 or 6 questions. I would expect
The
three.
first one is ideally they should be notebooking each time they meet with their clubs every week. However, they don't understand it. If I were to say to you, we're going to judge you on your notebook, you got to write down everything you did, and you get Sally chose this piece and she stuck it on the thing. They're not really talking about the decision they make, where they failed, how they did it. When they went to the league, they got some feedback from some high school volunteers we brought in. We brought in some junior jacket kids to do it. We brought in some community volunteers that we work with all the time. And they came in and they were able to talk to the kids one-on-one. I see what you did here. What I'd really like to see is why. How come you did that? Can you tell me why? So the next time we got lots of whys on the paper. So that's kind of the first thing. Of how they can develop it week after week. The second one is it's a blended tournament in the fact that it's elementary and middle school kids together. For VEX Robotics, you have to have 16 teams for it to be a qualifier. We wanted these kids to qualify, and I forgot to say that. You guys ended up with all of your teams that competed making state. They would not have. They just simply wouldn't have been able to attend a ranking competition that would make it possible. But because you guys hosted it, every single one of those kids will be at state on February 22nd at DJ if you want to come play. And 4 of those teams made it to US Open. And US Open is, you think of it as nationals competition, 100 of the best teams in the nation, along with a few from other countries. And that's actually held here in Council Bluffs at the Field House in April. So that's different opportunities, but they absolutely do learn from each other. The middle school kids help the elementary kids. The elementary kids came up with ideas that middle school kids didn't think of. I mean, it's very much cooperative.
Yeah, great. I'm excited.
Yeah, and Christy, I want to say thank you, because I mean, the whole cabinet went out and the kids could care less we were wandering around. They did not care. Yes, and it's just amazing. I mean, this picture doesn't show the amount of students that are there. And then for the partnership with 21st Century, because our children are bused from our elementary schools to Crescent and bused back for parent pickup. And just to see that partnership and to see how important this is, it's students that are engaged and learning and stretching, and they're not at home on their cell phones. They're not looking at just a Chromebook. They are doing, and it's pretty amazing. And I watched them go through their where they had to measure. I don't know if that's a skill thing or what, but they had to get it under the bar, and some of them made them too tall, some of them made them too, the inspection piece, and it was really, and none of them were defeated. They all knew they could go back and make it better. And I thought that was really incredible. So thank you.
At one point, I'd like to make that besides the transportation piece is access to the building. So we currently have it set up that you can get into it using our badge system, just like we do all of our other buildings. We're working on each room having a badge, so eventually we'll have the robotics rooms, we'll have a badge reader. Right now, they're using the old-fashioned keys to get into the room. The really cool thing about it is the system, if I got a phone call that said anybody needed to go in, well, not me, but Mr. Stow would be able to shut off the alarms and let them in remotely. And we have it set up that each night, so when coaches or sponsors leave, they don't have to set the alarms for us, because each night we have it automatically set to go off at 10 o'clock, so the building should be empty at 10 and the alarm will go off. So that's really important that, like Christy said, like Tyler said, they can go into the building anytime they want because the badge will disarm it for them. So we've set them up with badges, and so they really have access as long as it's open to the building whenever they want to get into it. Okay, the last piece that I'm going to talk about is the golf. The golf was set up and ready, and when we went and toured it, the facilities people truly were like, we could do this better if we dropped this ceiling out of this. It's in the old library in Crescent, if you'd been there, and it had a drop ceiling. So we had 2 simulators set up, and they said, if you let us take this ceiling out, we could get 3 golf simulators in here and it'll look much better. So they've done all the work. So I'll give you a date of when we're opening it, but I wanted to I didn't realize this about the golf simulators. I'd seen it before, and I thought you just went and hit a few balls and you play. So we have 9 courses set up with each simulator, and we use the Flight Scope software. So I want to just show you a few pictures of what this is. I am not really a golfer, but just looking at the top left are some different programs that you run. So you could just go and play a course, and it's really cool, and it looks awesome. But really, we're talking about kids having an opportunity to get better in learning. So we have things like a swing training session, the challenges, the chipping, the full swing session, all those things. But look at the picture on the right is really talking about how your club face is hitting the ball. So now the science of hitting a golf shot correctly, not just getting up and Happy Gilmoreing it down the thing like I would do, but really looking at your club face and seeing it live as to know what that means. The bottom left picture is your grouping. So the white circle is, I think it was a 9-iron or pitching wedge, and then the 7-iron and then a driver. So really looking at are you consistent with golf? Just like any other sport, consistency is key. So getting to where you can consistently be good. And then all this other data on the bottom right about ball speed and spin and all those things that go. Golfers know all of this and it makes sense to them, but fades and draws and all those things. It is giving you instant access to this information every time you hit a ball. So that is what I think is really cool and helping us get better, and we do it a lot in the winter time. Okay, so some key next steps for us. The golf simulator room is going to open back up March 1st. We're really close. It'll probably be this week or next week, depending upon weather, but it's close. It'll have the three simulators step by step in there, so you really have the opportunity to play with 12 or more kids at a time in there. We are looking at adding an esports room. So the old principal's office, it was a huge principal's office. Our esports have done very, very well for us in the few years we've had them at both of our high schools. Their equipment is starting to age out, but it's still very good equipment. We bought the top of the line when we bought it. So we want to take the equipment in the high schools, put them up there at Crescent, and then we want to do a middle school esports league. So again, we would bust them out using 21st century funds to bust kids out to do an esports league. We're having conversation about a broadcast media room. So using the TriCasters, using the cameras, doing some live events with robotics and with the esports, the name left, some streaming of those and teaching kids how to do those things. We're doing it at our stadiums and our basketball games, but really having it set up as a place they can go and learn. So that's something that we're looking at. And then the last piece is there is a lot of green space at the Innovation Sports Center. I said it wrong, but that's okay. So we're looking at John's style is like, can we build a putting green and sand trap, and can we do these things? So really looking at how we use the green space and outdoor spaces out there better too will be the next step with us. With that, I would welcome any questions for myself or our coach or sponsor that's here.
I don't have a question, but I just want to echo a comment that was made by both Christy and Coach Britsky, which stood out to me, is that you both said you feel like you finally have a home. So that was really great to hear that, because when we were talking with Tim and John Stiles about just, you know, all these ideas that we had with Crescent, it was great to land on that and just see like, okay, these sports and teams that we have going on that just feel like, you said, the tearing up and tearing down, that you just weren't really having any stability, that, hey, this is an answer. So it's really great to hear that you finally have that home, and the next steps sound wonderful, and I look forward to it, and that seems like the possibilities are endless, and there's great opportunities coming our way.
It's a small building, so they're not endless, but we have a lot of things, we have a lot of things that we
Yes,
could do.
being
And
very
really,
creative,
and you hit the
being
nail on that.
innovative.
Space is always a hot commodity for anything that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And our coaches and sponsors have been great, always great about just using the space and waiting their turn and doing. So having dedicated space to do these things is really, really important.
I was kind of wondering, the small space, like you said, it's not infinite. What percentage of Crescent is being used right now? You have so many activities going on, and just,
Well, and when we came to you, we talked to you about storage there too. So every room right now that we're not using, and we have a coach's room in there, and I didn't talk about that because it wasn't,
Kids Center.
it wasn't Kids Center, but it's, I mean, it is, because you can bring your kids in there and talk. But every room has something in it right now. So what we will be doing when we change some of the rooms around is we'll be taking some of the storage stuff out of there and making it more kid-friendly.
okay, thanks.
I just want to say thanks to you and to John for all the work you've put into this, and the dedication, and how you pushed us, and we like being pushed. And to see this building used for our kids
Absolutely.
and not losing it is very, very nice. So thanks again for everything you and John have done.
You're welcome, and again, it's a team effort. John and I, neither John or I would stand here and take credit, because really the facilities teams and our coaches and sponsors have really led the work.
I just want to
Thank you.
second that. Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. All right, that completes our meeting for tonight. We are adjourned.
Okay, done.